Hey team, welcome back to the show. Today, I am joined by Natalie and Andrea once again, and we're going to be talking through how to use high carb refeeds for fat loss. Basically, how do we apply refeeds with clients? They are a tool we use quite frequently, especially for already lean people trying to get leaner, especially for women. I find refeeds to be a very, very valuable tool when we are getting into, again, that point where I'm trying to go from lean to ripped. It can really help keep the fat loss moving along at a quicker pace, but also help in terms of better training, better fatigue management, better recovery. Thus, we can build more muscle. So basically, we're leaner, more jacked at the end of the diet. What else could we want? The thing is, I think that refeeds are something that it's a lot different than just the standard. Like you'll typically hear, okay, we need 500 calories below maintenance to be a deficit, right? And then, okay, so it's relatively easy for me to calculate what this person's deficit should be. Does it always play out like that? Absolutely not. But there's not a lot in terms of, okay, how do we actually apply this? And I think they're very much misunderstood. So it'll be fun to get into this and kind of how we use them. Before we do so, any personal updates from you, Andrea?
No, not really. I am leaving tomorrow to go to the Texas Pro, so I'm really excited for that. We're just gonna go
At a
for
rodeo? I'm just kidding.
the rodeo is the next night in
Okay. Oh
Fort
yeah.
Worth. No. We're going to the first night, so we're gonna miss the open category, which I'm bummed about because it's gonna be a really, really good show for the open. But
So it is a bodybuilding show, just for reference.
yeah, yeah. For anybody that does not know, it's a big bodybuilding show, and I'm excited for it because I've only been to like more like smaller regional shows, and this one's huge. Um, so I'll be able to see like the pro bikini athletes and like what that type of physique looks like in person because it's so hard to tell online. Like you see it on Instagram, but it's just hard to say what that actually looks like. Um, and then the next night we're taking the boys to a baseball game, so it'll be fun.
Super cool. Is that where Chip and Joanna Gaines thing is? Is that Fort Worth?
They're Waco?
Oh, okay. Yeah, you're right. Never mind.
Wait, so are the boys going to Texas Pro Friday night? That's
No,
incredible.
I did tell them they could go with us, and I didn't mind like getting some tickets for them, but they don't want to go. So our mother-in-law is going with us,
Oh,
and
okay.
so they're gonna hang out and I think they're gonna maybe go eat barbecue or something that night, and we're gonna go
Interesting.
watch the show.
They're gonna go train at Destination Dallas.
Yeah, I really want to go to Absolute Recomp,
Mm.
but I just think with the family trip, I don't want to spend the whole time away from them. We're already gonna spend the time away from them Friday, so I'll go back
What
down
are
soon.
you? Did you guys get floor seats, or is there like a balcony, or like, do you know?
I have no idea. Just got general admission tickets. It was either general admission or VIP. So,
Okay, so it might just be like open in terms of like first come first serve.
yeah.
Cool.
Natalie, what about you? Anything new going on?
I'm not going to the Texas Pro. I wish I was. Yeah, like just I'm kind of at the point now where updates are kind of happening often. Like I check in with my coach usually a couple times a week, and those days rotate too. So it's normally like I would check in on Sundays, and then it was like, okay, now check in on Thursdays, like Sunday, Thursday, and now it's like ad hoc, So like, hey, this is what I want you to do for the next 4 days, and then check in with me like Monday this next week, kind of thing. So that's
Okay.
kind of like rotating. Because I'm like further along now, so like it's we expect small changes but regular changes.
Yeah.
Like there should be movement in some way. If not
Right.
in scale, then like on the physique, visual changes. So I just did a check-in this morning and got my marching orders through Monday, and we're actually incorporating some hit,
Mm.
which will be interesting. And so it's going to be like a combo of like it's just like a few times a week, a combo of like hit and lists. So no calorie changes or anything like that. I was supposed to have a moderate day tomorrow, Friday. And I knew going into this check-in, I was like, he's gonna pull that and like just have me do low. And like sure enough, so like my next moderate day will be Sunday. Which is I was mentally prepared anyways. Like I also am at that point where like I want to push harder. Like I
Yeah.
want to get further and push harder. So I mean, no one likes their food being taken away or anything like that, but I'm also like here for it because I
Right.
just want to like see more progress, of course. So I'm like, whatever I have to do. Um, so yeah, we'll see how that goes. It's been like kind of a crummy week for sleep. I don't think that has anything to do with my protocols. It's
Okay.
just like I'm not a talented sleeper in general. And
I
so
get
like
it.
yeah, just some of those issues. And I can just kind of tell that I'm like holding on to some water as a result. You know, like I'm waking up and I'm just like, but I've noticed a pattern or trend the last few weeks really where like I'm someone who kind of like front loads a lot of my steps, front loads my cardio so that I can basically pull back on the weekends because like I don't have any days off, so to speak, where like I don't have to train or do cardio or work or do, you know, I have like everything is like always happening. So, you know, I've kind of tried to front load a lot of that stuff so that I can pull back and like sleep in on Sunday or just like give myself a slow morning, so to speak, and not like rush out the door. And like
Right.
that's usually where I'll see a drop. So I'm
Yeah.
kind of like really interested. I'm gonna let myself sleep Saturday too, and I'll just deal with the bigger gym crowds. That's fine. But I'm kind of just interested to see what happens if I just like kind of grant myself that permission this weekend to just not be on a schedule and I'll get everything done, of course, but like not just be so married to any kind of like timeline or itinerary or anything.
Yeah. I found that really helps my sleep tremendously as well as because I feel like I always wake up between like 3 and 4 to pee. And then if I like am
Yes.
like, well, I have to like I should train so that like I'm done by the time Katie wakes up and
Yep.
then whatever, then it's always off. And that has it's been something that's been quite helpful recently as well as just like it's all good. See what happens.
I think just like I always set an alarm. I never need it, but I always set it, you know, just in the event. And my like
Hmm.
absolute must get up is like 5 a.m. typically. I'm always
Hmm.
awake before that, but I like on a Sunday, for example, which is my normal check-in day with a coach, and you know, that's a whole process and stuff. I'll usually just kind of go to bed at night with the intention of like giving myself permission, like, hey, if you sleep till 10, go for it. And like I never do, of course. But just that like permission that you kind of give yourself to like, hey, it's nothing's bad, nothing bad's gonna happen. Like you don't have all that much to do tomorrow, like it'll be okay. I usually like sleep a bit better and then as a result wake up feeling a little bit leaner. And so yeah, that's what we're going with.
No, I for sure see a decent amount of clients who aren't like going out a whole lot will typically see the same weekends when stress is lowest. You can tell the person slept more. We'll see a drop. Or it is the opposite if the person is like going out more and we're typically going to see weight quite a bit higher on Monday. So I see the same thing quite frequently. All right, let's get into refeeds, starting with refeed fundamentals. So first, Natalie, can you break down for us how you would explain to a client what a refeed is and kind of its intended purpose within coaching?
So refeeding is a refeed is a structured feeding up like in a diet period, so where calories are lower, so their calories are restricted. It is intentional and structured period of feeding up, and they can be a day, 2 days, could be 3 days, more, you know, plus minus. I think an important distinction here because I think it gets tossed around a lot colloquially, and I do this too. Like sometimes when I'm just like talking through things with clients, like I will kind of like use either name, but you know, saying something like it's different than I would say calorie cycling or carb cycling. But I know sometimes I use them interchangeably, not on purpose, but you know, just in an offhand, like, oh, so we've got this like refeed coming up kind of thing. But they are different, and I think a podcast like this is a good way to break those down. So calorie cycling, like as you have done podcasts on this in the past, is like, you know, again, like we're undulating like low, maybe medium and high days of carbs, basically. We're playing with your macros throughout the week, but it's all like coming out in the wash to a deficit, right? To drive fat loss. So refeeding is again like strategic and intentional means of offsetting fatigue and stress. And this we'll get into this a little bit later, but physically and or psychologically as well. And those can work in concert to achieve the main thing. And the main thing is to keep progress going.
Absolutely. No, I think that's very well put. It's typically something that's a lot more reactive rather than like a calorie cycle might be pre-planned, right? We might have you do
Yes.
like 3 low days and 1 high day. And again, it is like I will oftentimes like that high day, I'm going to call that a refeed day or a high day. Like
I
the
do it all the
terminal.
time. And I know, like, every time I know I do it, and I'm like, whatever. It's like, it is an easy way for people to understand kind of what you're doing, but I think this podcast is a wonderful opportunity to break that down.
Basically, though, it is a higher food day interjected in our diet. And sometimes in calorie cycling, it is almost more like, hey, if we're doing like 4 low days and 1 high day, maybe it is a little bit more like almost like a pre-planned refeed. So yes, the line there is kind of blurry, but I think very well put. Anything else to add before we move on from either of y'all?
No, I think we're going to cover a lot of other topics within this, so.
Absolutely. Okay, so when it comes to our demographics specifically, I would say our most common client is like an already relatively lean woman trying to get leaner, build muscle. It's never just about fat loss. Again, it is changing my shape. So again, building muscle is a very important part of that. I find that refeeds are especially helpful for this demographic. Big part of that is just understanding like when it comes to fat loss for women versus men in general, it is a little bit different game, right? Female physiology is quite a lot different. Um, you have to be very like women specifically have to be very good at like adapting to stressors. I think typically, so like when we're looking at like, hey, you need a higher level of essential body fat in order to just survive. Cool. And that's like a cool thing in that, in like the survival sense, right? Like your body is good at keeping you alive. So if it senses, hey, we're very consistently eating a lot less food and we're losing fat quickly, cool. Like if we continue down this path for too long, it's not going to go well for us. So because of that, we're going to kind of put the brakes on the fat loss process. We're going to maybe like convert more of our like T4 to reverse T3, which is kind of like the brakes for thyroid rather than free T3. Kind of think like the gas for thyroid. Um, we're going to like downregulate sex hormones because it wouldn't make sense for us to reproduce here, which is going to, if like food availability is so low, which in turn is going to lead to where lower energy, quality of life is worse, our ability to build muscle recover is worse, which is going to downstream like impact our body composition negatively as well. And the leaner we get, especially, the more we are going to, like, if we're at a higher body fat percentage, you can rely on a lot of your fat stores for fuel throughout the day. Even to a degree, like fuel for our training, or we're using more of those fat stores throughout the day and we can like use more of the carbs we take into fuel our training. Whereas as we get leaner and leaner, we have less of those internal stores to fall back on. A refeed can also be something that really helps us improve our training quality, improve our recovery, and build more muscle. So again, like if we're already quite lean, we already have a lot of muscle and we're trying to take it further, which is where a lot of our clients are, really can help us better manage our ability to add more tissue. But again, it's kind of a game of we want to manage stress. It's like applying enough stress via our deficit, our training, our cardio, whatever it may be, to create a positive adaptation. But there is a fine line where if we push past that, we are actually going to, it's too much stress for us to consistently recover from, and we're going to experience more negative adaptations. Instead, your body won't respond as well. So, really is a good tool for us to manage that side of things. Anything else y'all would add there, like for our clientele, our demographic specifically? Like a lot of men, you can just, I think this is a really good example of this. Like for most men, I find you can just like run them into not run them into the ground, but you can diet them super aggressively. We don't like really, and there's not as many like fluctuations in things hormonally. We just won't impact the system as much. We won't see like stall as quickly. Whereas for a lot of women, it is again, if we just like, okay, we're just going to slash calories. We're not going to be mindful of all these other variables. We just don't see things move how we would expect. Anything else y'all would add there?
I think an important note is when you are talking about like a textbook refeed versus what we mentioned earlier with the calorie cycling, these are most applicable to people who are very lean, like people who are really getting lean. That's where we see them being effective. So
For
if
sure.
people have lots of like excess body fat to lose, and again, we'll just get into this, so I don't want to preempt anything, but you know, maybe not a candidate for a refeed.
No, I think that is very important though, because it's a like a, or like, hey, I'm 3 days into my diet, I need to refeed, for example, right? It is something that as we get the leaner we are, And the longer we've been dieting, the more helpful it is, right? But
I think it shifts a little bit more toward the psychological and just from an energy perspective, being able to put more energy into training whenever somebody's not like really physiologically needing it yet. But then
yeah,
at the same time, you have to use it for the right person, because with both the high low days and a refeed day, some people just can't really handle that level of like up and down without using it as like a, oh, well, I have so much more flexibility now. And then that messes with digestion and it really blurs the data. And some people will just do so much better with a straight intake across the week where they can just get into a flow with it.
yeah. And definitely like the client psychology is a very important part of it as well. Max has plenty lots to add there as well. Give me a refeed. Um, I don't know if Andrea is able to speak to this at the moment, but I would next like to dig into what factors we're looking at that usually tell us it is time to introduce a refeed, because this ties in super well with what we were just discussing there.
Yeah. And you kind of
Or
alluded
do
to
you
this
just start with someone right out of the gate, like right away we're refeeding?
day one. Well,
Day one, you gotta refeed.
well, like you said, kind of, we don't really need a refeed until we're depleted. Like we've got to dig a hole before we have any need to recover from that. And so what I will usually do is push somebody fairly hard until we start to see some of these signs that I'm going to talk about, and
Hmm.
then introduce a refeed. And some people can go quite a while, and some people need them a little bit sooner or more quickly. But a lot of that comes down to like how lean they are already, kind of like what Natalie said. And so, what I'm generally looking for is some biofeedback from the client, like excessively low energy or a big spike in hunger. Or we'll see sleep quality or quantity take a nosedive, um, or recovery from training. So, more soreness or just more like muscle fatigue that that is longer than what we would normally want to see. And like say that we've already managed their training volume, at that point we might need a refeed to improve those things. With training, speaking of training, so performance drop off is a huge one. This one
Hmm.
is one of the biggest things that I'm looking for. We ask in our check-ins if there are any movements that haven't progressed that week. And here and there, it's pretty normal to have a lift that doesn't progress, or even goes down. But if that starts to happen with more than one or two lifts, um, or we get a pretty big drop off, then that's a really good sign that we need a refeed.
Yeah, the training is a big one that I look at as well. If someone's just mentioning, like, dude, I'm so much more tired in my training this week suddenly. And I'll again look at like volume as well. Sometimes it makes sense for us to add in a refeed. If like more food doesn't seem to fix the issue, we'll typically reduce volume a bit. Or sometimes there's like a, yeah, I could probably, like, I feel like we might have needed to pull back here a bit regardless. Um, but again, I think it is important that this is typically for like a more advanced, someone who's a little bit leaner and a little bit further along is when we actually start to see this. I think it is also easy to confuse this with just like a, hey, well, you slept 4 hours last night because we were just not managing that well. Or, yeah, because you didn't eat before you trained and we trained at like 10 a.m. And, like it's like dehydration. Or I think that is very important when we're looking at someone who is like newer to the process. Sometimes it's like a, hey, like what nutrient timing strategy can we use to fix this? And it's like, well, first, like let's eat, let's hydrate, and let's actually sleep, and like those little things. Because again, if we're not getting to the point where we're pretty lean, yet again, these things just, we're not that depleted to the point where we actually need these a whole lot. From a biofeedback training, like what other signs, if anything, we missed there, Natalie, are you looking at that tell us a refeed might be needed?
I think you guys kind of covered it actually, but another one that I'll kind of add, I guess, would be if we're like hitting kind of a stall
So I say
sometimes.
the same.
Yeah, like a hard stall. Like and again, this is assuming that like adherence and consistency are in check, right? but like, so we're doing all the things and we're executing very well, and there's a stall, like it's not moving. Sometimes like I will input or program a refeed, and a lot of times like that I'll see like how they react or how they respond to it, like how they feel, of course, from biofeedback perspective, but also like a lot of times we'll see like a drop on the scale.
Mhm.
And that'll kind of be our sign that it was needed. And then we can assess from there if like maybe we want to add like an additional refeed day or something like that. Um, and a lot of times like that's what was needed to kind of like get to the next level kind of thing. And then we kind of just start dropping again. And that's also your sign at that point to start checking in maybe a little bit more frequently, like, and from a fatigue management standpoint. Something I will also add that I know, Jeremiah, you and I touched on in a previous podcast, but another strategy here can be like pulling back on cardio, for example,
Mhm.
because that is calorie expenditure. So, though technically not a refeed, could be like another strategy here as a stress mitigation or fatigue mitigation strategy or tactic. Um, but yeah, that's what I would add. On that's like kind of the physical side of things. On the kind of psychological end of things, um, that is a lot more nuanced, I think, because a lot of people that could benefit psychologically from a refeed might also be the same people that like Andrea spoke to earlier, in terms of like might not be able to manage it quite as well. So that's a slippery slope there. But I do think sometimes, we are humans and we thrive on like dopamine, right? And when you get like really lean, really depleted, we kind of have an absence of dopamine. Like we're not, our food's probably not all that exciting. So it's not really like doing it for us anymore. We're not like going out to restaurants and trying new things. We're not, maybe we are online shopping and that's how we're getting our kicks, so to speak. But there is kind of like that absence of dopamine. And so sometimes like when you do interject like a refeed or something, you just kind of get that like that new, that like shiny, like cool. It's just kind of like a psychological boost. And like because
Yeah.
that physiology follows psychology, a lot of times like that's enough to result in like a whoosh or something. And at that point it's like we can kind of just guess as to whether or not this was a physiological response or this was more like a psychological response that resulted in a physiological response type of thing. So it's fun to like nerd out over. But yeah, yeah. I hope that all made sense.
No, that made complete sense. But yeah, I will say that was something I meant to bring up before as well is we'll often see someone's consistently losing on a given intake, and we know this again, adherence is good. Suddenly we just like see a hard stall. And then alongside that you will typically see other signs, or maybe even like the scales going up a bit. It seems like this person has like more inflammation. They're experiencing a lot more soreness in training, like or post training, they're having a harder time recovering. We're seeing like sleep is a little bit more disrupted, their energy is a lot lower. Very good sign that yes, like the stress applied has exceeded what we can recover from. So as you said, like it's a fatigue mitigation tool. We can add food. Also, sometimes we might like alongside that, like, hey, maybe we're gonna like skip a training day here. Maybe we're gonna pull back cardio or steps. There are a lot of levers we can pull there. But that is another very common time when I would say that's really like the most common time when we're talking about like this type of refeeds versus just like a calorie cycling, this more reactive refeed. Something like that is the most common time I will implement it. Is again like, hey, we are kind of adapting. And that's like very much, it's in a way also like this is more in the realm of calorie cycling. Like it is a way to kind of interrupt the deficit signal, right? So we are intermittent higher food days. Again, kind of disrupt the deficit signal so our body doesn't adapt as quickly, but that's more so just like a calorie cycling than like the refeed specifically. So more reactive. I'd say that's quite commonly how I use them. What you just mentioned there, Natalie, when we're talking about what we're usually trying to assess or accomplish with a refeed, is that your answer? Or was there anything else out on that side of things? Because we already kind of answered the next question that I was going to get into.
Oh, sorry.
It's completely okay. You're
Did I?
forgiven.
I feel like yeah, I feel like I said what I needed to
I
say.
think you answered that quite well also.
You're
Andrew,
making me
anything else?
second guess myself though. Like, did I miss a big key or something?
Basically, what we're trying to assess or accomplish with the refeed. Like,
Yeah,
what are
so
the improvements?
we mentioned this in the beginning of the podcast, but like it's to keep progress going.
Right.
It's a stress mitigation tactic, but like under the umbrella of we're still trying to push for progress. So it's important to mention, which we already have, that like this is for people who are already like depleted and lean, right? Trying to push to those next levels. I think what happens is a lot of people end up using them too early.
Hmm.
And then we actually end up slowing progress because that person didn't actually need a refeed.
For sure.
So
I think that's very well put. Should help training, should improve our biofeedback. Like all of those things should feel better psychologically. We'll typically see a bit of an improvement as well.
and I think it's also worth mentioning though that like you have to kind of know how to read the client well and kind of interpret what they're saying, because I think a lot of, especially a lot of newer clients, maybe you do have a newer client who is like pushing to get very lean.
Hmm.
I think we don't often see that. I think often it's like usually kind of a more intermediate to advanced client who's like kind of like been around the bend a few times, who's like, okay, now I want to push to the next level. But I know with like maybe I would say like maybe even some intermediate clients, sometimes you can tell like sometimes they're kind of angling for a refeed, like, oh man, my training's like really, really suffering, but
Yeah, y'all aren't sneaky.
but then we like need to kind of talk through that nuance of like how much fatigue is okay, because it is like I know we've all talked about on the podcast before, like how, hey, like training shouldn't suffer too bad in a deficit. Like we need to keep showing up, we need to keep training hard, we need to keep pushing it. But I think sometimes like it's our job as coaches to manage those expectations on behalf of this like more beginner or potentially intermediate or intermediate advanced client, to say like, yeah, like leg day is just gonna suck sometimes. Like, sorry, like we don't necessarily, need a refeed or like higher calories for every leg day, even though like I also would prefer that. Like I don't know any one of us here who wouldn't prefer to train on more food. Of course we would. But, we still need to push for progress sometimes.
And
Yeah,
there's so much psychology that goes into that too with like as you said, like that doesn't always mean we need a refeed. A lot of times it's like, man, we started a diet 2-3 weeks ago and we're already seeing a drop off in training. That's not from the low food. That's because you've decided that you're going to be weaker in a deficit, you
or
know?
again, like poor management of things like your nutrient timing or our
Yeah.
sleep. Like yes, it shouldn't be just a couple weeks in. Like we're seeing a huge drop off because we need a refeed. I think that's a very good point though, in terms of like this, especially talking about like a lean person getting leaner, or like Natalie, what you're doing right now, getting ready for a show. Or I remember talking to Jen Millardo about this, like the month before she went, like her shoot where she was ripped for it. Natalie and Jen prepped for a photo shoot this last year. And she was like, yeah, I'm just tired. And honestly, like training just doesn't feel as great. I'm not excited for it. I love it still, but I'm just like hungry and tired. And I was like, yeah, that's just how it's gonna be. Like we can't refeed you out of that and still get to the result you want, right? There's again a reason that like if you haven't been able to get to that point before, it's not just like something that comes to us easily. It is still like when we're again lean person trying to get leaner, or as a whole, if you're dieting, it is normal to feel like a little bit less gas is in the tank when we're training or outside of it as well, right? It's normal to not always want to diet, but there is an element of, yeah, we're going to have to push through some discomfort there.
Yeah, like there are some things that just like don't need to be fixed, so to speak. Like not everything is an emergency. Like I'm hungry and tired. And, like you said to Jen, like, well, yeah. Yeah. If, that's what makes this challenging. Otherwise more people would do it and do it successfully, right? So, not everything is a problem that needs to be solved. A refeed is to solve a certain problem, right? But that doesn't mean that every time something like that crops up, it needs to be managed. Sometimes there is a level of acceptance. And again, that's part of our job as coaches, is to like educate and also help interpret and kind of like weed out the noise in terms of like what is normal. What should the threshold kind of be? And of course that threshold is very different for every individual, but sometimes the conversation is suck it up. Like this is what we signed up for.
Yeah. I think it's very rare. I'm curious what y'all's take, but it's very rare that just hunger in itself would be a reason that I would implement a refeed. I find that if it's just hunger, Natalie, do you have something to add?
Yes, because this gets into the psychological side of things,
Okay.
where I agree with you. Like, hunger is not a reason for a refeed, but if you feel very strongly that a client is like on the edge, where like they are potentially going to like big time go off plan, which is going to very much stall progress, and like we're gonna have to kind of go back and like set the timeline back, and it's gonna set our timeline back if they just kind of like if you have to kind of have that feel for like how hard can I push this person, because if they're like on the edge of like I'm gonna go bury my face in some Chick-fil-A or like whatever, some animal crackers, then that might be a reason. And I get, would you call it a refeed? I'm not sure. Would you just call it like I'm going to give you a high day? It's semantics at that point. But if you think that that could potentially talk someone off the ledge from like setting the plan back, it's like, okay, just like give them a free meal kind of thing. And then they're like, oh, I feel so much better. Like that scratched the itch for me. Cool, let's carry on. So
It's a good point.
but again, like that involves a lot of communication. Your client athlete has to be really open with you, to feel, because I know a lot of clients like feel like they shouldn't feel that way, like, oh, I just want to go, like, I want to go overeat, I want to go to my favorite restaurant, I want to, and I think there's some shame associated with that sometimes. Like, I don't want to let my coach down. I don't want to let them know that I'm tempted, kind of thing. But I would rather know if someone's really on the edge there, because like I said, like me giving someone a free meal, like, hey, I want you to go out and just like I want you to like, let's try and keep it in check a little bit. Like, but like, let's go get like a burger and fries, is way better than an entire day of the efforts, you know? Like that
Yeah.
might set us back a little bit, but not to the point where, and then it happened all weekend because the client didn't want to communicate with you. And so now we've like not just lost a meal, but like we've lost like 2.5 days. And come check in Monday morning, you're like I wanted to look for those signs where like maybe that we were reaching our psychological threshold there.
Yeah, that is a really good point. And thinking on that, there are for sure times where, like, I know this person doesn't actually need a refeed, but as you said, like, I can tell they're kind of, I know they still want to push this further. And, like, if we pulled out, like, in a week, they would want to get back into this. But the grind of, like, the diet and everyone's like mental capacity for this is different and it expands a lot over time, right? Like what I think of as being dialed in now, even like versus my first photo shoot, is like leveled up so much. So it's okay if we're there. But there have for sure been times where it's like I don't actually think they need this, but like the perceived grind of the diet and also just like there is an element of the novelty of it. Like, all right, we're gonna give you a refeed, we're gonna feel so much better. And then like this new cool exciting thing that we're adding in, it's like cool, okay, like I feel so much better already. Like it's like, oh yeah, that worked super well. When like was it actually the refeed or is it more so just a psychological thing? I mean, maybe a combination of both, but I have definitely, yes, you're right, like used that in the past, even when not needed as well. Anything else from y'all on that one? Cool. Okay. When we're talking about setting refeed macros and how high do we bring up calories? Do we go to maintenance? Do we go higher? I'm personally typically going to want to start. I aim for like about said person's maintenance. And this is honestly something that like in thinking through this, I don't have that extremely clear. Like I'm gonna go exactly like this percentage. It's funny how I truly feel like you can just get a feel for these things. I'm typically looking at what is that person's carb intake, and I want to give them a lot more. So when we're talking refeeds, it's going to be an increase in carbs, right? That is going to give us the benefits of a refeed. That is going to help improve leptin levels, which will in turn drop hunger. That'll replenish our muscle glycogen stores so we can improve training. It will even have, like, to a degree, an inverse relationship with cortisol, so it'll bring cortisol levels down. Really, like us doing a like high fat refeed instead of high carbs doesn't make sense in this context, nor does like a high protein. Carbs in like such acute settings are by far going to be the thing that is going to make the biggest difference maker in how we feel, how we perform, or recovery. So it is going to be carbs. I'm typically going to look at that person's, like, where are that person's carbs typically? And I'm going to want it to be quite a significant increase from that. So, I mean, typically I'm going to want at least, I would say, like 100 more carbs, if not a little bit more than where they were. So if it's like, hey, we're on 100 carbs typically, cool. Can we get this person close to like 200 grams of carbs? Or if we're at like 200, thinking about it like a larger client, like a male client, okay, can we bring us closer to like 350 on this day? So typically it puts us, I would say, like around or slightly above maintenance. That's generally where I'll start. And then basically from there, just looking at how well did the service in terms of recovery. If we see like the next day they dropped, okay, next time we could potentially, like we actually dropped weight the next day. Cool. Okay, next time we could actually potentially play with increasing this a little bit more. If we saw we like maintained for a day or two and drop back down, okay, we're about at the right place. Or if we see like, hey, weight is stuck way longer than we wanted, and we're sure it's not just like a recovery issue still, then I maybe went a little bit too aggressively. Would y'all approach that any differently? I don't feel like I have a super cut and dry, it's like again, like 69% or anything like that.
I do think it's so intuitive on the part of the coach because you also just have to take into account the person in front of you and how they process their food. So there, you just know the clients who they just process things slower. Like they're a little bit slower to drop weight, their digestion's a little bit slower, they're stickier whenever they go off plan. You don't want to refeed those clients as hard as you would someone in a different situation. And so maybe with those, I'm more conservative, and we might not get that extra 100 grams of carbs, but we're going to get at least more than what they've been eating. They'll be more satiated. They're going to feel better in their training. And what I'm looking at a lot is where their calories have come from throughout the diet. And then also, as you said, like how long does it take for the scale to drop back down? That's a big part of it. Because if they are really sticky, we might just not be able to refeed nearly as often, or we might have to keep those a little more conservative.
I think which really ties into how do we know that the refeed worked or didn't work? Would you basically say the same thing there?
Yeah, looking at how long it takes for the scale to come back down is a big one. So as you said, if they drop right away, that's great. They probably had some stress on their body they were hanging on to, and they dropped some water weight. If it takes a couple of days, that like you said, that's a really good place to be. Like next day they might be up a little bit just from food still kind of sitting in their stomach and the additional carbs and glycogen, or glycogen and water. But if it's longer than that, then the next time we probably just won't feed them quite as much. But then alongside the drop in the scale, we also just want to see a reversal, temporarily, a reversal of those biofeedback and training detriments that we saw previously. So we want to see, honestly, hunger, that's just probably not going to drop off even with a refeed. So I'm not really as concerned with reversing that one. But like they should have a little bit more energy the next day. Their training should feel better. They should see improved sleep that night. Like those are good signs that the refeed did its job.
Yeah, there's not really like a it didn't work. I don't know if that was the right way for me to frame that. As you said, like, hey, ideally within a couple days we'll see weight come back down a bit, but it's not like that didn't work. It's just, hey, next time we might not want to feed this person up this much, given we did still see like these other positives. But it's again like not a huge deal there. We just might want to pull food back a little bit next time.
Mhm. Or make sure that they're managing their refeed well. Like one thing that I'll tell my clients with their refeed is make sure that you're not adding in a ton of fibrous carbs. Like I know that that's going to be the thing that you're tempted to do because we just want to feel full.
Mm-hmm.
But if you can add things like Natalie's bagel or, some rice, or even oats is fine, potato is fine, but don't go adding in just like a ton of vegetables, fiber wraps. Like anything that's going to really slow digestion down and make you feel really bloated. For one thing, that's not going to feel good for you. Like you're not going to look leaner. And that's really like a fun part of a refeed is like, oh man, I got more carbs and now I look leaner. You're not going to experience that if you're just taking in triple the fiber on that day. Um, but then also it really skews things for us too. Like, okay, was that too many carbs or was it just that now we need to poop a few more times over the next couple of days?
Don't do the 100 grams of carbs from broccoli refeed. Sounds absolutely awful. No, I think that's very well put. Anything else? Natalie, are there specific client traits or like client types in the people you see seem to benefit from refeeds the most?
Not really sure how to answer this. Because I think a lot of what we talked through earlier in terms of like this is someone who's pushing to get pretty lean,
Yeah.
and person's probably already pretty lean. It tends to be a person who pushes themselves pretty hard,
Mhm.
and like so therefore again our job becomes much more of like knowing when to push and when to pull.
Yeah.
And this archetype is usually the go go go. And like I'm gonna go until you tell me not to. And that goes for diet as well as training. So that's when we step in and we'll like institute a refeed or like pull a training day or something like that. Kind of to save them from themselves. um, I don't
I
know. Is
think
that kind of like what the answer you were kind of looking for
That's
there?
so true though. On like the harder you're training, the better you're gonna handle a refeed.
Yeah. I think a lot of this is kind of what we've touched on before is like there is a sort of like level of experience and like maturity. I think that is a good candidate for this because I think a less mature or less experienced, and I don't mean to use like mature, immature in like a positive, negative kind of way. I mean more like experienced.
sounds pretty positive and negative to me. Go on.
um, I think it's really it's more it's not so much mature, like a seasoned athlete, so to speak. Um, the person that can implement the refeed kind of like what Andrea talked through in terms of like, okay, we're actually being smart with it and we're using like rice, bagels, like honey, things that digest very easily, and we're using it for the function that it is, not using it as like, oh, fun, free day, kind of thing, because I almost never see it go well in that circumstance. Like, and again, it's just, did it work? I don't know. Like, because the data's just so skewed because we took a hard left on food selection. It's like we've introduced a bunch of new foods that we don't normally have, like maybe a lot more like veggies and stuff. And it's just like, well, now I'm not even sure what I'm looking at here. Um, and I do like to kind of give guidance in terms of like, hey, I want you to take a little bit more and we'll like put this post training, like I want you to add like some rice to your post training, so kind of give them guidelines on how to structure. If they're on a meal plan, it's like, okay, we're going to put it here, 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 and this is what you're going to have. Not on a meal plan. And a lot of these clients are like really experienced, so they do a very good job managing their macros. I do like to give them guidance, like, hey, I would put it like here, 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 kind of thing. Um, but yeah, someone who's less experienced, they it just to them it's like, oh, cool, more food. Now I can finally have that thing I've been wanting, and it's like, that's not exactly why we're doing this. I mean, it's like as a human, I want you to have those things, of course. Like, wouldn't that be wonderful? But as a coach, it's like we're again to our earlier point in the podcast, this is for a strategic purpose.
For sure. And I find when a client is to the point where we actually need like reactive refeeds like this, people are typically super on board with, yeah, I'm good with just using it with these foods that are going to like work best versus like, I want to go get XYZ food that I've been missing. I will also almost always, even if the person like isn't following the meal plan exactly, like when someone's to this point, I will always like almost always still have a like meal plan laid out for them and like, okay, if I were following the meal plan, this is how I would go about implementing this, and this is why this would be ideal. So like kind of a nudge, like, yeah, this is probably best for us as well. Even if there are some clientele who are really like, I love the macros, I love the flexible dieting side of things, and it is working well for us. So I don't mess with it too much, but still like to give a nudge in that direction.
I do like though when you kind of like start to get the negotiations. Like, well, but like it's so and so's birthday Saturday and we want to go out. So, and it's like, and again, as a human, I want to be like, yeah, for sure, take a free meal, go like have fun, use those calories, but it's like, but that's not why we're doing this. Like it's that's not like this needs to be like calculated, intentional. Like I want to pad your training with some extra carbs if it's a training day, kind of thing. And so I that's just a funny one to me is like when the negotiations start.
Yeah.
Like, hey, I need you to refeed like tomorrow or like maybe first thing in the morning we're talking and it's like, hey, like have some extra XYZ. It's like, actually, can I do it? Can I do it Wednesday? Because I have this. And it's like, no, I need you to do it now, actually.
I will if I have, and again, it's dependent on like how deep are we in fat loss. But if I have someone who's really, really pushing hard, and it's like I know, and they've expressed like this is very important, like big quick fat
Hang
loss
on,
is.
that's
Go ahead.
totally different. What you're talking through now is totally different. If like this has been on the radar for a while and it's like this important thing.
That wasn't what I was talking about.
Okay, my bad.
It's all
JK.
good. Point of that was like a if that's where I know it's like this is their top priority, or we have a goal like a photo shoot and we're already like very lean, trying to get leaner. I'll a lot of times like yes, schedule it around like maybe I want it around like these specific training days where they've been struggling more, but also try to if there's like instances in the past where like that person having more flexibility on the weekends to throw them off, I will like and we're gonna take this Tuesday and Wednesday, right? And then intentionally like put it or like Thursday. Honestly, like I really like Wednesday, Thursday. So like they've fed up going into the time when they normally struggle. There's not as much leeway to kind of get a little bit looser with it then. I'll say though to what you were mentioning earlier, bring it back to specific clients who typically benefit from this the most. I do find it is always that person who is like, dude, we maybe there are things like we can improve training intensity and our execution, but it is typically that person who has a tendency to just run themselves into the ground, right? Where I think of a couple of clients of mine where it's like, or has it's like the person who, if you give them like two refeeds back to back, will like sometimes come back and like, I skipped one. Like, well, no, like that's not what we want,
Or
right?
how about like, oh, I didn't take it.
Correct. Right. It's like, I'm
Honestly,
good.
I remember the first time coach gave me a refeed. This was like my coach Hannah at the time. I didn't take it.
Natalie is a pretty good archetype of this client actually.
Because like I didn't
Typically,
really understand what it was at the time. And like I didn't think like I wasn't where I wasn't like adherence and consistency were not a problem. They weren't suffering.
right.
And I was down to like keep pushing. And that was kind of my limited understanding back then. And so I was like, I don't feel like I need it, so I'm just not going to take
And that is perfectly describing this type of client, right? They're typically in a place where it's like, hey, we're not missing our cardio sessions, we're not missing our training. You also are like sleeping 5 or 6 hours a night, and where it's like, again, we see all these signs that we need this. We need it because again, it's not just push harder, keep eating a better response. Again, we need to actually be able to recover to a degree from the stress applied to keep making these positive adaptations. So I find that's typically the person who benefits the most from it. Anything else y'all would add there? Um, in terms of refeeds backfiring, I think we really covered this pretty well. I would say before I understood them and just thought like, there was a time, I feel like it's been like a pendulum swing where initially I was like, refeeds are sick, everybody needs them. That'll like keep metabolic rate so much higher, make fat loss so much easier. And I was giving like all of my clients who were brand new to this refeeds and it just wasn't doing anything. It was basically just driving their total calorie intake higher. And especially then where I wasn't working with like extremely lean people trying to get leaner, it was just again like very gym pop clients. It was almost always just like oh cool, well I'm gonna go get a lot more flexible with this. But again, it wasn't like where it was hurting our progress, if anything. I think I don't know if I have any other. Do y'all have any other examples of like a time this didn't work well or like it backfired?
Maybe just not setting enough parameters around it. It's kind of similar to what you said, like
Mm-hmm.
not knowing who to use it with and who not to use it with, and the person that's going to just get way too flexible and use it as a cheat day, basically.
I do think the weekend, what you brought up, Jeremiah, in terms of like structuring it on like a Wednesday or Thursday or something like that, I think the weekend's the danger zone.
For sure.
For a lot of people, like give them an inch and they'll take a mile. And,
Give a mouse a
I'm not
cookie.
even like, I'm not assuming nefarious intent either. Like, no, I don't think anyone is like, cool, I'm gonna like take this and run with it. I think that's just like a lot without actually understanding what we're trying to do with like refeeds. I think just a very surface level understanding is like, coach gave me more food. Cool. I'm gonna go
Yeah.
use it. It's like you just gave me
Yeah.
$100. Go spend it.
And
Kind of thing.
if you don't pre-plan the day too, if you go
Yes.
into the day and it's like I usually have 120 carbs and now I have 250, I can just go into the day and eat kind of how I want, and I'm gonna be able to easily hit these macros because I can, freestyle it and get there because I have so much more flexibility than normal. But that stuff adds up fast, and you're not as full on this food as you would think you would be.
Or like calorie hoarding.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Like I'm gonna save all these extra carbs for like this like really fancy Ninja Creamy at night or something like that.
That isn't. Yeah, that's a quite common one as well. I would say, especially for that. I don't know if I would say actually that. I don't have any additional thoughts on that. Actually, I take back what I was about to say. Um, Andrea, it would be easy to think that refeeds don't help fat loss. I've heard some coaches say this because it might actually slow fat loss because we're just increasing the net or we're decreasing the net deficit across the course of the week if we're eating more food. What's your take on that?
It seems like that sentiment is quite often from like very exclusively evidence based, which it's not that we're not taking into account studies and things like that. But what the research shows on them is that it's just so temporary that it in the changes in leptin and ghrelin and thyroid hormone that doesn't matter, and the overall weekly calorie deficit is what matters. And that's not wrong, but the difference is research is never going to be done using the type of people that we're coaching through this, people that are more advanced and that actually need refeeds. Like we mentioned, the more beginner clients or higher body fat clients just really don't need them physiologically,
Hmm.
whereas more advanced clients are going to get a lot more from them. And so the changes that we see in hormones are going to be transient, but that's not necessarily the reason that we're using refeeds. So even though thyroid hormone might not come up for long enough for it to make a significant difference, or ghrelin or leptin might not change enough to make a significant difference, if we're able to then go put that energy into the gym or sleep better for a couple of nights, that does start to make a really significant difference. And if it changes how you feel for long enough that it changes how you execute, then that is a significant difference.
Yeah. Um, I mean, in terms of the research side of things, you said that, like a lot of it is focused on leptin and ghrelin, and we will see like leptin come up, but it drops back down quite quickly within I think like a day of. And that leptin is tied to energy expenditure. So typically, like if we had higher leptin levels, we would be doing more like pacing, fidgeting, blinking type things, and lower hunger because it decreases ghrelin, which is kind of like one of our hunger hormones. That and thyroid are typically the things that are looked at. But also, yes, there is a lot more there because we haven't looked at how it impacts every variable. Like the very common argument against that line of thinking is, okay, but we've never looked at like how this is going to impact like cortisol. And again, kind of looking at it as like a cortisol reset throughout or when we're implementing this, right? Where, okay, we're drastically reducing stress. And that in itself is going to play a big role in the adaptations that we see or don't see when we're dieting, right? Like that's going to like how much do we convert to like our reverse T3, for example, or our sleep. It makes such a big difference in so many of those aspects. But
Or
then
maybe
also,
just
yes,
refilling glycogen stores, we preserve more muscle, like maybe weight change, which is
yeah,
typically what people are looking at, isn't going to change across time. But if we're preserving more muscle and the weight change is the same, we're losing more body fat, and we get a better like physique result at the end of it.
For sure. And I will say, again, just anecdotally, have 1000, because I was of the same thing for a long time. There was a good period of time where I didn't use them except for adherence reasons. And anecdotally, I have seen, especially with the type of client that we work with, again, even if it's not super evidence-based yet, we just get such a better outcome from a physique perspective and a fat loss perspective, especially for clients who have like, man, I can just grind and grind and grind. Like that type of client we mentioned who benefits from this the most is also typically the person where it's like, dude, I can just diet and like I feel like I'm so dialed in and just nothing is happening past a certain point. Typically is the individual who seems to benefit from the most and can see fat loss move along so much quicker. Anything else to add from either of y'all there? Refeed versus a full diet break. I feel like a diet break could be an entirely different topic. When like, what's the difference between the two and how do you implement them? I don't know if I even want to get into that. Do you want to get into that, Natalie? I feel like I feel like we should record a different podcast on that. I'm sorry for the teaser for the listeners. Stay tuned in the future. I will say, like, final closing thoughts here. Big mistake I think that a lot of coaches make when it comes to using refeeds is, again, understanding that by the point that we need to apply this, we will already typically have a client in a place where they're quite lean. And we can't be afraid to dig the person the rest of the week. I think this is, again, quite common. It's like in this ideal world, it's like, oh, she's dieting on 1,800, 1,900 calories, and then she has these 2,500 calorie refeeds a week. And like she gets to eat so much food but the reality is like, and we are still, yes, increasing the amount of calories we're taking in. So we do have to make sure we are still like in a good sized deficit the rest of the week. And a lot of times, again, with a lean person getting leaner, we were just talking about this in our team call. That number will sometimes just be a decent bit lower than we want it to be. But again, even especially if we're just using this from like an adherence perspective rather than like a stress management perspective, that is where like, okay, where this high day really helps, we are at a place where we're gonna have to dig a little bit more the rest of the week to make it work. So I think just again, like if we are implementing these tools, we also need to make sure we're okay with pushing people hard the rest of the time, or we're just not gonna get anywhere fast. Anything else y'all would add there?
Yeah, refeeding too early.
Mm.
Because again, like I used to be a little trigger happy with the refeeds too, and it's like it's just not needed yet. And then it ends up slowing progress, which is really not, that's the opposite of the point.
I would agree. I have one of my clients he's been crushing it, but I feel like it was like, okay, the first week we're just gonna start you all low days, and I'll probably refeed you the next week. And I was like, oh, I feel so good. We're gonna do it another week, and I did like 6 weeks where I was like, I'm pretty sure next week's gonna be the week, but not quite yet. But we were crushing it every week. He was still feeling good. There just wasn't a need for it yet. So I think that's another great one. Anything else before we wrap it up? Cool. Well, hopefully this episode was helpful. If you would like to apply to work with our team, hit the link in the show notes. If you enjoy the show, do us a huge favor, leave us a 5-star rating or review, and we will catch you all next time.